some of the most popular questions I get from beginners learning Korean or from people that are interested in learning Korean, well, those questions are,
how should I practice my speaking? I'm an introvert. Do I really need native speakers to practice? How do I practice if I don't have any Korean friends? How long does it take to be conversational? How long does it take to speak Korean?
안녕하세, you, 안녕하세요, hey you. It's Natalia. So how long did it take me to become conversational in Korean, or in a more general sense, how long does it take someone on average to become conversational in Korean? Well, I have some issues with this question. I have some issues with this question because honestly, no matter what I say or no matter what A, B, C, D, E says, you know, A, B, C, D, E are people. No matter what anyone says when you like ask them this question, it's really not relevant information to you. It's not helpful in any way. Honestly, like hear me out. Hear me out before you click out of this video. If I tell you, oh, it only took me 6 months to start speaking Korean and have conversations in Korean, like real conversations. If you have been studying Korean for a year and a half and you're not able to have a conversation, how do you feel now that I said it only took me 6 months? Probably not great. You probably feel a little defeated, unmotivated. You're wondering why you can't seem to learn Korean. Maybe you're starting to feel kind of like, I'll never learn this language. I've been studying so much longer than this person and they're already having conversations and I'm stuttering through a simple sentence. So was that useful information to you? No. Now, if someone on the other hand says, oh, it took me about 4 years to be able to hold a conversation in Korean, and you're at the beginning of your journey, maybe you haven't started. Like maybe you're still looking at what the first resource you want to use or purchase is. Like you're gonna be holding that book and be like, 4 years? I'm sorry, book. But you're gonna be like, it's gonna take me 4 years to speak. Like, is it worth that time? Like, am I willing to wait 4 years? I don't have 4 years. Suddenly, like, you don't want to even start because maybe you don't want to take 4 years. Like, and honestly, everyone's journey is different. I know that sounds really, really cliche, but honestly, let's think about this for a moment. If you're new to my channel, you might not know this, but for those of you that have been here a while, as you know, I learned beginner Korean by myself within 2 months. So the equivalent of 2 like university level beginner Korean courses, self-taught. Then I flew to Korea to study abroad for a year, where I was taking intermediate courses in Korean that were taught in Korean while I had a Korean roommate and Korean friends that I saw every day, and I lived in Korea in a non-metropolitan area where I was able to use Korean a lot. So if you were to ask me and I said, oh, it only took a year, and you're like, okay, cool, year, that sounds doable, like that sounds good. But what if I don't tell you that I was in Korea? What if I didn't tell you I was in the situation or like the perfect environment to learn Korean quickly? What if I didn't tell you that? So then you're studying really hard, diligently for a year, and you're still not able to speak. How do you feel now? Like you've created this expectation. Well, it took Natalia a year, so it'll only take me a year. Not relevant information because your journey is not going to be the same as mine. And even if you do the exact same thing, it's still going to be different. So for example, there was someone in my program. I talk about him a lot because he still amazes me. He only took about 3 to 4 months to be able to have a conversation in Korean. He went from not knowing Hangul to speaking to Koreans in Korean. And I remember we were in the same class and I'd be like, are you sure we're in the same class? Because I could not speak at the same level, even though like he'd been studying Korean for a few months more than me, but I tested into his class. So hypothetically, we're the same level. Bro, what the heck? And then I know someone else who literally became fluent in Korean within a year. I've been studying for like 5 years, as we said earlier, and I'm nowhere near that person's level. And then I also know someone else who's been learning Korean longer than me and still has like some issues speaking. I know how like tempting it is to ask me, to ask other like language YouTubers or people you know that are learning Korean, how long it took them to be able to speak so that you can like create some kind of like expectation, some kind of timeline for your journey. And I get it. I understand why you want to do that. But I really think we shouldn't do that. We should start like not asking people that because I don't think it's helpful. Yes, I do think it's beneficial to ask other learners about, you know, things like how do you stay motivated? How do you cope with not wanting to study? What are your go-to resources? Have you tried this app and do you think the premium subscription is worth it? Things like that. And that is the perfect segue to talk about the sponsor of today's video, Kakao. So I have teamed up with the Kakao team to create 2 group chats for learning Korean on the KakaoTalk app. So if you are not familiar with KakaoTalk, it is the most, literally, the most popular messaging app in Korea. You have probably seen these lovely, lovely characters in my videos. They are the Kakao Friends characters. They are the emoticons on the app. They're so, so cute. Oh my goodness. So yeah, if you didn't know where these are from, now you know. So in the app or in these group chats, I've created one for beginners and one for intermediate and advanced speakers. So determine which one you think would be better for you and pick one. Both of them have limited capacities. So, you know, if I see you in both of them, I will remove you. I know, I'm a mean person. No, just kidding. But I want to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to participate. I would really, really love to see you guys in one of the chats. One of them, not both of them, please. One of the chats. I would love to connect with you guys. I am hopping in and out of both of them, so come hang. I'd love to see you there. And I do think it would be very, very beneficial for you to join if you don't have, you know, anyone that's also learning Korean, you know, have that sense of community. It really does help. So now that you have realized that you should no longer be asking people how long it took them to become conversational in Korean, I have 4 tips I want to give you guys to either help you start speaking if you're a beginner or help you further develop your skills if you are more on that upper, like beginner, intermediate level, right? So the first tip, which it's going to sound cliche and it sounds really easy, but honestly, this is the hardest thing to implement into your studies, is I want you to go from I'm not ready to speak Korean to I'm going to practice speaking the Korean that I know right now. So I know those sound really, really similar, but I promise you they're not. One of them is saying, I'm not ready. I can't do this. I don't know enough words. I don't know enough grammar points. I can't speak Korean the way I speak my native language, right? And then there's this other one, right? I'm going to practice what I know. That is, just think about it. It's kind of, the phrasing is more freeing. It's like, I acknowledge that I don't know everything, but I know something and I'm going to use that something. I'm going to practice what I know. It's kind of like, one is like, that sets the bar really high. And the other one is like, this is where I'm at and this is what I'm going to practice. Because like, if you're a beginner, let's say you've only been studying Korean for a month, honey, you already speak some Korean. No, you're not like conversational and you're not like fluently speaking Korean, but like you speak some Korean. So if you kind of start using that mindset when you're talking to natives, if you have that opportunity, or if you're on an exchange app or something like that, like if you go into it with the, I'm just going to practice what I know, it's so much easier to start speaking Korean. It's so, so much easier. And honestly, it was like this mindset shift that got me to start speaking Korean. And if you want to know more about how I like overcame this like mental block, you can check out this video. I went into detail about it there, so I won't like say it again, but honestly, like this is the most important, most beneficial thing you can do if you're ready to start speaking, or like you want to start speaking, but you haven't been able to like make that jump. The second tip is to learn vocabulary that is relevant to you. I know I've said this before, I've said it many times, but let's think about it. If you are intermediate, let's say, obviously you still have a lot to learn at an intermediate level. Like I'm intermediate and there's still a lot that I can't talk about, but if I learn the topics that I want to talk about, or the topics that I find myself talking about a lot in English, and I learn the phrases and vocabulary related to those things, when I speak Korean, I'm going to feel a lot more fluent. Let's be real. So for example, one thing that always comes up when I'm talking to a Korean person is what my job is. So if I learn the vocabulary related to my job, I am instantly going to feel more conversational in that situation. So instead of saying, I work for a company and we buy things, if I learn the vocabulary, I can say, I work for a company in blah, blah, blah industry, and I source products that we use to put in XYZ products, which I'm not going to say what products because I don't want you guys to figure out where I work. But like, if I learn the word like to source and vendors and material, then honestly, I start feeling like, I'm so good at speaking Korean. Okay, no, but it does help not only better communicate what I'm wanting to say to the person that's like that I'm conversing with, but I just feel more fluent because I'm not struggling like what word can I use because I don't know the actual word that I'm looking for. I guess the most common topics that you should probably be learning vocabulary and phrases for in general for like everyone is school if you're a student, work if you've already graduated or you have some kind of part-time job, family, and if you're a beginner and you're like, Natalia, I'm like, that's a little above my level, that is a-okay. There are still things that you can do to prepare for conversations that you will have in Korean. So for example, Koreans have like this checklist that they have to get through when they first meet you. They have to ask you like all these questions before they can ask you anything else. It's always like 한국어 왜 이렇게 잘하세요? Meaning, why are you so good at Korean? Like as soon as you say 안녕하세요, they get all like, like, I'm sorry, my Koreans, I love you, but you guys all respond that way. Okay, the Koreans that are like in Korea, they get really excited and they always ask you, why are you so good at Korean? And then you should be able to say like, oh, like I'm not good at Korean, right? And then they're gonna say, where are you from? How long have you been in Korea? How long have you been learning Korean? Or why are you in Korea? All the questions that I just said, please write them down and like learn how to answer them, because I promise you, when you go to Korea, you're gonna be asked all these questions. And so if you can get through the first like 5 minutes of this conversation, which is these questions, you're gonna feel a lot better about continuing to speak Korean in that situation, right? You're gonna be like, you're gonna be really, really proud of yourself. So I'll put those questions in the description box so you don't have to like pause the video, but please like, prepare yourself, give yourself the opportunity to start it off each conversation, like, I guess on a good foot, on a good, I forgot the idiom. You know what? I don't speak English anymore, okay? But like, give yourself that opportunity. Now that you guys have the right mindset and you are learning the words and phrases needed for the topics that you want to talk about, the things that are important to you, how to answer those questions that you'll be asked once you're in Korea. Yeah, when you're in Korea speaking Korean, let's talk about that pronunciation and intonation. I get a lot of questions about these two skills, and I completely understand why. Like when you speak Korean, you want to sound like you know Korean, you know what I mean? Like, let's be honest, if someone were to walk up to you speaking your native language and their accent was really good, you would either assume, one, they are a native speaker, or you would assume they are a foreign person who has learned your language to a very, very high fluency. But in reality, they could be a beginner and just have really good pronunciation. Like, you don't know, like when you hear someone's pronunciation, that automatically gives you some kind of like signal of how proficient they are. So I think the most important thing you can do if you're wanting to improve both these skills or develop these two skills is doing some active listening. Yeah, I know it sounds super easy and you're probably like, Natalia, I've been listening to K-dramas for years, or you're like, Natalia, I've been studying Korean for a year. I have done my fair share of listening. What else you got? Yes, I understand. I understand, but hear me out, please. Like Steve Kaufman said in the interview that I did with him, your brain is a pattern recognizing machine if you give it enough input. If you have the words there, you'll realize like, oh my goodness, I have been pronouncing this word wrong. And I didn't even realize it because when I heard it, I didn't realize it was a certain word because I've been pronouncing it wrong. Not only will your listening skills get better when you do this, but your pronunciation skills are going to get better also. Like, to be honest, guys, for me, when it comes to pronunciation, I did not study pronunciation. Like, some of you guys say, like, my pronunciation is really good. Some of you guys have said it is terrible. To those people, I say, fight me. Not really. Please don't come to my house or something. But, like, I've never studied pronunciation, like sit down study ever. Like, it was just a lot of listening in the beginning and listening to how other people talk. So yeah, I think when you're doing these things, you'll notice like when people breathe. I don't think anyone ever talks about this, but in my opinion, the most important thing in developing your intonation is knowing when to breathe. Like, there are Korean sentences that are so long, they would be run-on sentences if they were in English, but they're in Korean, so they're not. And so but like the hardest part about like saying those sentences or reading those sentences out loud is knowing when to breathe. Literally, like, because if you breathe at the wrong point, you're putting stress on one part, you are creating an unnecessary pause or a pause that shouldn't be there, and now your sentence is whack. So if you've ever heard me practice like reading things out loud and you hear me say something again and again and again, it's probably because I knew I had the intonation wrong because I took a breath at the wrong point in the sentence. I highly encourage you guys to record yourselves. I know listening to your own voice is very, very cringy. How do you think I felt when I first started making videos? I was like disgusted with myself. But recording yourself and then listening to the audio of that K-drama for that line, or listening to the audio for that dialogue in your textbook will really, really help you identify which parts sound great, like which parts you're like really close to what the native speaker sounds like, and which parts could use some work. Now, if you are wanting to level up, if you are wanting to improve faster, my fourth tip is for you to do shadowing. Shadowing isn't new, it's not revolutionary, it's not a secret, but if you're not familiar with this study method, it's basically you are saying what the actor is saying at the same time. In other words, if you're watching a K-drama, you know, you've already spent time doing your active listening, and now you are ready to speak the sentence. You say it at the same time the actor is saying it to improve your speed, improve your intonation, because saying it when somebody else is saying it really helps you figure out that you're breathing at the wrong time. Not gonna lie. Honestly, I think shadowing in general just helps like you stop translating in your head, which is something that you guys have asked me about a lot. It's one thing to read something and know what it says, and to listen to something and know what it says, and then to say it yourself. I feel like once you actually start saying, you know, these dialogue sentences that are in your textbook, or, you know, in a K-drama, and you're like, you're doing it yourself, you will stop translating in your head. I'm just saying, like, there are some words, guys, that I use in Korean so much more than I use in English, just because my 말투, like my way of speaking in Korean, is different, so I use different words. And so when I think of that word and I want to use it in English, it'll actually like come up in my mind faster in Korean. Like the Korean word comes first. Like if it was a race, Korean shows up first, and then 5 seconds later comes English, and English is like, let me hear. You called? You know, hopefully that made sense. But I know earlier I talked about like how I personally overcame that mental block to start speaking Korean, and I will link that video for you down here. I think it's really beneficial if you're a beginner and you're trying to make that jump. Also, thank you to Kakao for sponsoring this video. I'll see you guys in the next video. So 다음에 봐요, guys.